Ce să mai înțelegem din comportamentul administrației Trump? Probabil această întrebare ne-o adresăm fiecare dintre noi zilnic, de câte ori mai auzim declarații neașteptate de peste ocean. Noua conducere a Statelor Unite pare mai prietenă cu agresorul Vladimir Putin decât cu democrațiile europene și mai ales cu victima Ucraina. Să fie toate acestea parte dintr-un plan de negociere pe care nu îl știm? Există vreun plan? Avem o singură certitudine, că nu ar trebui să punem egal între Trump, MAGA și Statele Unite. Primim explicații de la Daniel Fried, fost ambasador american. Sunt Cristina Cileacu, începe Pașaport diplomatic. Ambassador Daniel Fried, former US diplomat, welcome to Diplomatic Passport.
Thank you.
Ambassador, we have a lot of declaration incoming from the Trump administration criticizing Europe and behaving like United States is no longer a friend and an ally of Europe, but rather a friend and an ally of Russia. How shall we look to all this?
It's not so bad yet. I know what you're talking about, and Romanians have every right to be angry and astonished at some of, let me put it bluntly, some of the dumber things coming out of Washington and out of the Trump administration. And by dumb things, I mean stating that Russia was not responsible for the war, that Ukrainians might have been responsible, that Russia was provoked. That's just utter nonsense. It's utter nonsense. So that Romanians' concern is understandable and fully rational. But this isn't the end of the story. 3 weeks ago, Donald Trump was talking about putting more pressure on Putin, on the possibility of greater sanctions on Russia to force Putin to come to the table and negotiate a fair end to the war. And if you look carefully, the Trump administration has laid out a sketch of a plan to end the war which could work. I don't say will work, I say could work. That is, a ceasefire in place and security for Ukraine, including the possibility of European troops on the ground. Now, the Europeans shouldn't go into Ukraine without American military backup. This is fair. And the Europeans, French, the British, are considering this. So that's the good news. A ceasefire in place, if you don't force Ukraine to recognize Russian illegal annexation, could work. Ukraine could be the West Germany of this century. That is, the front line against Russian aggression, backed by the West, European troops on the ground, and it would mark a strategic defeat for Putin. Now, that's the good news. And Romanians are going to stop me and say, wait a minute, what about all these dumb things that are coming out of the Trump administration? And Romanians are right. There's a lot of either mixed messages, if we want to be polite, or simply nonsense. And there is, I think, a fight within the Trump administration. The Trump people have one big point. Europeans, not so much Romania or Poland, but the Germans, the British, the French need to do more for their own defense. They need to have greater military capacity and not rely so much on the United States. They're right. And every American president since Eisenhower has felt that way. So there is, let us say, a rational and constructive side to the Trump administration, but there is also, and I'm going to be honest here, a dumb and even naive side. Let's take, for example, the U.S. draft resolution in the United Nations
that
about on the third anniversary of the war. It's too weak. It's the kind of thing that Republicans used to criticize if Democrats tried anything. We need to stop being nice to the Russians in the hope that they will be nice back. Russians don't work that way, and every Romanian knows it. They respond to strength, and we must be strong. So I agree with a lot of the Romanian criticisms, and not just Romanian. The Poles feel the same way. The Europeans are generally right. The Trump people have a point that Europe has to do more for its own defense.
Absolutely.
So the deal that wants to happen, that could happen, is that Europeans say, yes, we're going to step up in Ukraine and more generally. And then Trump says in response, okay, then we're all in on the transatlantic alliance. Trump could say, I've won, I've pushed the Europeans, I'm prepared to stare down Putin. This could end well. I'm not saying it will end well. I'm saying that the job of European governments is not just to look at the Trump administration with horror and exasperation and frustration, even though I understand all of that. The job is to take the mess we're in and figure out the best way to move forward. And there is a way to move forward.
Romanian were criticized twice in two various occasions recently by the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance. He made the same references, saying that he's not understanding exactly why the elections were cancelled in Romania, and that is an anti-democratic thing. How shall Romania answer to such comments coming from our partner, which is still the United States?
I need to be very careful because Romanian elections are none of our business. I think all Romanians would agree that annulling the first round of a presidential election is not a good thing. I was here in December in Bucharest and I understand the reasons. It is critical now that the elections are held and be seen as credible. I think JD Vance had no business criticizing Romania, and if he wanted to say something, the thing to say is that democratic rules are critical, free elections are critical. That's enough. It is also true that JD Vance supported Alternative for Deutschland in Germany. And what's strange about this is not just the American partisanship. And we shouldn't do it, it's not our business, we should stay out of it. But also the fact that AfD, of all the German parties, is least likely to do what the United States says Germany should do, which is stand up more for European defense, push back against Russian aggression, and increase its military capacity. AfD stands for none of these things. So I think JD Vance was expressing a partisan political preference, not expressing well U.S. interests as his own administration has expressed it. So, therefore, conclusion, I don't get it. And I think it was a mistake. Doesn't matter what I think, but you asked a question and I'm giving you the best explanation I can.
One of these explanations could be the fact that having his intervention, the Vice President of the United States, also backed up by Elon Musk's intervention that also posts a lot of fake news about Romania on his own social media, is a fact that MAGA wants to divide Europe or something like that. Can we take this hypothesis into account?
Romanians need to distinguish between MAGA and the Trump administration and the United States. I think the implication of your question is, I think, correct. That is, there are a lot of people in MAGA world who seek a kind of ideological affinity with nationalist parties in Europe. The trouble is that the nationalist parties in Europe are not going to work with the United States to deal with our common adversaries like Russia and China.
They prefer more Russia and China.
Well, that's what's so strange. If you stand for America first, which is what Trump says he stands for, then why do things that support America's foes, like Putin? It makes no sense. I prefer the Ronald Reagan tradition on the right and the Harry Truman tradition on the left. Both traditions are rooted in a free world strategy. And Romanians are very familiar with this because this is why we enlarged NATO. Clinton enlarged it for Poland, Bush enlarged it for Romania, the Baltic states, and others. Completely different politics, same strategy, great success. MAGA world thinks of things in different ways, but there are people in the Trump administration who still believe in the free world. They just want Europe to stand up and do more. So here is a possible solution. The Poles, for example, are spending a lot on defense. Their foreign minister, Radek Sikorski, was just in Washington. Their president met briefly with Donald Trump. The Poles are doing their best. And their strategic views are awfully similar to Romania's. Poland and Romania have been friends for a long time and for very good reasons. So the game, it's, as we say in America, game on. And Romania, Poland, Finland, Sweden, the countries in Europe that know Russia best need to be the most active they've ever been, working with the Trump people, pushing the Americans, because it doesn't pay to be angry. What's the advantage of that? Take the frustration and turn it into action so that the United States ends up in the right place. The signs from the Trump administration frustrate Romanians because they're all over the map. You don't know what to expect. But in that inconsistency is our hope, because it means the Trump people haven't settled on a single strategy. And Romania, other European countries, if they're willing to do more, can have an impact.
Well, Ambassador, you know very well Romania, you also know very well Poland. And another issue we have here in Romania, as Romanians, since you mentioned Poland, is the fact that Poland seems to be always in the perfect position, talking a lot with the administration of the United States. It doesn't matter what administration is, the Poles are there in the first place. In your view, what we don't do well, because somehow we always end up second place or third place or God knows what place?
In the first, the Poles are saying the right things, and Poland and Romania are strategically aligned. So this isn't a bad thing.
We are saying the same thing.
Right, same thing.
So
I take your point. I would like to see Romanian officials and parliamentarians more active. Romanian politics are not my business. Come to Washington with a message of what Romania is doing, of how Romania is contributing, and it doesn't matter what the politics are. Go see the Republicans. Go see the Democrats. Be present. Now, it's going to be frustrating for a while because the State Department is not terribly well staffed. The foreign policy set up in the Trump administration is very thin. But I will say this, I work at the Atlantic Council in Washington. Anytime a Romanian leader is in Washington, we will help organize a strategy session, we will help explain where Washington is, we will help provide a platform for Romanians to get their message out. It's a good thing. Romanians contributed a lot to the common successes we've had since the 1990s. And I welcome a Romanian voice. This would be good.
Back to United States, because we did talk about the foreign politics of this administration, which is confusing everyone on the planet, more or less. But back home, what is happening? Because what we see and hear in United States is a lot of people being fired, the state apparatus is being dismantled, or at least it looks like it. In the meantime, is the Democratic Party still present? Because nobody hears anymore about the Democratic Party.
The state apparatus is not being dismantled. It is being put under pressure. And Elon Musk is creating a lot of noise and a lot of tension, but he is not actually yet going after the state apparatus except in rhetoric. The Trump administration has moved very fast. He won the election. The Republicans have the presidency, the Senate, and the House of Representatives. But America's a very big, very decentralized country. And a lot of what Elon Musk is doing, a lot of the confusion, tension, even chaos, is not popular among Americans. And opposition takes a while. Media is instant. You know, an hour is a long time in the media world, not in the real world, not among people. Trump has been in office just over a month. You're beginning to see the first signs of popular frustration and confusion in the United States. And this will grow if the Trump administration continues to indulge its performative and destructive side. Even conservative Americans who voted for Trump out of frustration, inflation, stagnant living standards,
migration, and so on.
Trump is not actually governing to solve those problems. He's engaging in cultural politics and politics of chaos. And that's not going to be very popular. We'll see. I'm not a prophet, but the notion that the American people are just lying down or doing nothing is really not quite accurate. It takes a while for people to decide whether they like what the White House is doing or not. And in the last week or so, there have started to be signs that people are not happy. Also, some of Trump's moves against Ukraine have generated opposition from pro-Trump newspapers. The New York Post, the Wall Street Journal.
Even Fox News had the reference.
Even Fox News. And a lot of Republicans in Congress are quiet, and I don't think that they are actually showing a lot of courage. But if Trump's popularity slips, they are unlikely to show him a massive amount of support. And Elon Musk is unpopular. And I think given his erratic nature, he is likely to stay unpopular. So American politics is going to generate a lot of concern and astonishment and outrage, and it often does. But it is not the end of the road. Moreover, a point about American politics. The MAGA movement is simply America's version of similar movements all across Europe, which means that mainstream politicians need to find solutions to the problems that people are worried about and frustrated about. And in the past, political leaders have found ways to address these things. Whether it's anti-corruption or economic policies that address the concerns of working class people, there should be ways to do this. There is a market for political leadership that is not destructive or leads to no good ends. And it's not for me to tell Romanians what to do, but there, in the United States, and I can comment about our own politics, there needs to be an alternative that deals with the real problems and in a constructive way, and that's possible.
One common thought that is spreading in Romania, at least these days, is the fact that Trump equals United States. Is it correct to think like that?
No, it's not correct, fortunately. Now, Trump is the president, and Romanians who are frustrated by what he's saying and doing with respect to Ukraine, well, frankly, I agree with them, okay? They see what's truly there. They're not making it up. But that's not the United States. That isn't even the entirety of the Trump administration. We don't know where our policy on Ukraine is going to land. Trump is anything but consistent. He goes this way, he goes that way. He likes to try everything and throw up a lot of confusion so then he can decide what to do. And remember this. He doesn't want to be seen as a loser. And if he bows down to Putin, he will be seen as a loser. which is a good motive for him to actually win, and he can win by backing Ukraine, and it's possible. Russia is not as strong as Putin would like us to believe. Its economy is in bad shape. And let's face it, did Romanians 3 years ago really think that Ukraine could hold off Russia without any Western troops at all for 3 years?
Nobody did believe that.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Neither did we Americans, but they've done it. They've done it with our help, but they're the ones who have done it. They've held back Russia. Now, Romanians know Russian history awfully well. It is a myth that Russia always wins wars. It beat Hitler because Hitler was a threat to Russia's survival. But Russia has a tendency to lose the imperial wars it starts. It got into the Crimean War, lost. Russo-Japanese War, lost. Got into World War I for no good reason, lost. Afghanistan, lost.
It's a lot of lost. Let's hope it will keep it like this, and that the relationship between Europe and United States will be stronger and stronger.
I believe in the free world. I believe in a Europe which is united and in alliance with the United States. So, yeah, right. Let's hope so. And let's work for it.
Ambassador Fried, thank you so much for this interview.
My pleasure. Mulțumesc.
Atât pentru astăzi, dar rămânem în continuare online pe pagina de Facebook a emisiunii și pe conturile noastre de X și Instagram. Revenim cu subiecte noi din lumea diplomației și a politicii externe, vinerea viitoare de la 11:30 și reluare sâmbătă după miezul nopții. La revedere!